Thank you, Larry, and thank you for your accomplishments here in Utah, and I believe increasingly around the country as the ripple effect of what's happened here in the Utah legislature, the State House, and this conference continue to play out. It's now my privilege to introduce an extraordinary man who is chairman of the American Principles Project. He is an extremely successful hedge fund manager. He's a board member of the Committee for Monetary Research and Education. He is an author of numerous articles. I've co-written a couple of them with him, and believe me, the co is there because he really has forgotten more about monetary policy than I'm ever going to know. And unfortunately, I'm much older than he is, so I don't have much time to play catch-up. He has done things before the age of 40 and learned things and gained expertise that is beyond any comparison that I'm aware of. And he made possible the founding of the American Principles Project, which is a systematic effort to get the country's policy debate back to the founding principles of our country. That certainly includes its founding monetary principles. And without further ado, I would present to you somebody who is already making a tremendous impact behind the scenes, and I believe will in the future make a tremendous public impact as well. Sean Fieler.
Something's wrong. That's what markets are telling us. The increased volatility, the increased correlation of all financial assets, the halving of the yield on the 10-year bond. It's pretty obvious investors are afraid. And the reasons to be afraid are many. Greece is bankrupt. Portugal is bankrupt. French banks are bankrupt. And our minds are unsettled by what this means for the financial system. A financial system built on the idiotic assumption that sovereign debt is risk-free. Unsettled because many of us who have come of age in what economists call the Great Moderation are accustomed to modest amounts of social and economic change. We are habituated to expect that government officials will come and tell us everything's going to be okay. And then the Federal Reserve and the federal government will smooth over the rough edges with timely monetary and fiscal stimulus. Over decades, this pattern of intervention has ratcheted down the range of economic and social outcomes that most of us are willing to entertain. So much so that many still cling to the irrational hope that the debts of the most troubled sovereign credits can be rehabilitated without bankruptcy. And more importantly, so much so that Americans still fail to recognize the much larger change right before our eyes. Specifically, that the American social contract is being called into question. We are all familiar with America's unique version of the social contract. Work hard and get ahead. And I am certain that many in this room are personal witness to the benefits of this system. We have much greater tolerance for inequality in America because as a people, we are less envious than other nations. This is not a romantic idea. This is a well-documented fact. In a recent joint study conducted by Brookings and AEI of the OECD countries, Americans remained far and away the most willing to accept inequality. We accept this inequality because we believe in earned success. That anyone, if they are smart enough, hardworking enough, can get ahead. But the American social contract is not predicated on the success of the smartest and most determined alone. The contract has an important corollary, namely that the average guy can get ahead. that the average guy, or even the little guy, is sufficiently well off to take advantage of opportunities that the system presents and is making progress. This has always been a necessary element of the American social contract. As Tocqueville so eloquently put it almost 180 years ago, in America I found no citizen so poor that he did not gaze with hope and longing on the pleasures of the rich, or that his imagination did not savor in advance goods that fate obstinately refused to grant him. While the most capable continue to do well, even according to the government's own statistics, the average guy has not made progress in a generation. The first time in American history this has happened. Over the past 4 decades, the unadjusted income of the median American household has risen more than 5-fold, from $9,000 to $50,000 per year. But after factoring in the dollar's 82% loss of purchasing power over the same period, the median household's income only rose 16%. And this much more modest increase is the result of the growing prevalence of 2-income households. The median real income for working men over the same 40-year period rose just 6%. And that improvement only accrued to the shrinking percentage of men fortunate enough to still have a full-time job. To wit, since 1971, the percentage of fully employed men of working age has dropped from 78 to 67%. The lowest percentage on record since this statistic was first collected in 1948. Any honest look at the data makes clear that the crisis of the middle class did not start in 2008. The financial crisis and subsequent anemic recovery have merely crystallized the problem, clarifying in the mind of many Americans that the solution is not around the corner. A realization that is transforming an economic phenomenon into a social phenomenon, in which the social contract is questioned. This questioning can be seen everywhere, from the growing focus on jobs in the election cycle, to the mayor of New York comparing his city to Cairo and Madrid. Mayor Bloomberg recently remarked, "You have a lot of kids graduating college that can't find jobs." That's what happened in Cairo. That's what happened in Madrid. Money managers, like me, who spend their careers trying to see around corners, are actively discussing what to do about the growing social tension and the growing fragility of the American social contract. The world over, when the social contract weakens and wealth is politicized, the wealthy look for a way out. But unlike the wealthy in the rest of the world, no one is leaving America. If you really want to be convinced of American exceptionalism, just start looking for somewhere else to live. Just try to find another country in which earned success is valued more than equality, in which government is limited by law and a constitution. Even a quick review of the alternatives will convince anyone that America is worth fighting for. But what do we do? How do we stop the fundamental transformation of America? Are we fighting inequality? Are we fighting unemployment? Are we fighting Byzantine regulation? Are we fighting confiscatory taxation? It's a very broad fight. The stagnation of the middle class and the erosion of the social contract have been going on for at least 40 years. And it is impossible to isolate the cause. It is impossible to disentangle the effect of the various forces at work. Maybe technology has put an ever-growing premium on highly skilled labor. Maybe globalization is depressing wage rates for the unskilled. Maybe it is, as Chairman Bernanke suggests, our K-12 educational system poorly serves a substantial portion of our population. Or maybe we just need to start telling everyone the truth, so that the average guy does not need a Princeton degree to see through the Fed's attempt to manage his expectations. One of the principal reasons why the middle class has been doing so poorly is that the Federal Reserve and the Bureau of Labor Statistics have been lying to them for so long. Rather than accomplish its mandate, employment and price stability, the Federal Reserve has simply convinced America it was delivering on both promises, while it was not. The employment ratio has been declining for decades, while stated unemployment remained in the mid-single digits. Equally ridiculous is the Fed's claim that it has maintained price stability. By their own account, prices are up more than 5 times in 40 years. With the entire system set up to anesthetize the middle class to what is really going on, it is no wonder that the middle class has made some bad decisions. Their paychecks grow, but their standard of living declines. In essence, by trading price stability for its mere appearance, we have given the middle class the appearance of progress without its substance. Like most lies, this lie started small. Instead of trying to artificially control the prices of goods as it did in the 1960s and 1970s, in the 1980s, the government started fudging the number, just a little every year. In 1983, the government added a calculation of owner-equivalent rent to the CPI. And ever since, the CPI has understated inflation. The unemployment statistics, similarly, have always been managed by defining who is and who is not in the labor force. So while the unemployment ratio has looked good at times over the past 4 decades, the employment ratio has been in long-term decline. What the middle and lower class need is the truth. They need to know that if they earn $50,000 a year, they made it. They can raise a family, drive 2 cars but not 3, take 1 vacation but not 2, and save $5,000. They need a yardstick that does not change. After all, that the average guy made $9,000 in 1970 and $50,000 today, but he's still actually worse off, is a bit confusing to explain given the perceived level of price stability. Some argue this confusion can be addressed by going to a single mandate, that we can fix the current system, accurately state CPI, and manage it to 0. This is not realistic and is not going to happen. The notion that experts are going to become stubborn truth tellers over time flies in the face of any reasonable understanding of human nature and any reasonable reading of history. Regrettably, it is equally unlikely that we move directly to the gold standard from a standing start. Such a change would require overcoming opposition from everyone that benefits from easy money. From the banking system that is designed for loose money, to the federal government that needs a buyer of its bonds, and the economists who make a living trying to run and explain the current system. There is much opposition. Furthermore, Americans are practical people. Fixing the system in a grand bargain is not the American way. Our revolution was a gradual one, a century of self-government before throwing off British rule. We did not go in for a French-style Big Bang, which is what the resumption of the gold standard would be at this point. Accordingly, failing a complete breakdown of the current paper system, I do not believe that we, as a people, have the necessary familiarity with gold as money to mandate its use. There is, however, a way to reintroduce the truth into the monetary system without mandating it, without restructuring the entire financial system all at once. To do this, states need only avail themselves of their constitutional right and recognize gold for what it is, money. We need not reform the federal government via a frontal assault. We can achieve the same end through competition. This is what has worked the world over. If you want to close the post office, you don't run a political campaign against it. You invent email. If you want to close a state bank, you don't protest it. You permit a more efficient private sector bank. Furthermore, this step of state-led gold resumption makes sense politically. Asking states to reintroduce gold money is much easier than asking the federal government to give up its printing press, which is why this is actually happening. In Utah, it is law, and Utah will be joined by a growing number of states, beginning with South Carolina, hopefully next year. And with enough states, we will have the critical momentum needed to ask the U.S. Treasury to review its clearly unconstitutional interpretation that gold is property and not money. Admittedly, this necessary step of state-led resumption will not immediately fix fiscal and trade deficits as a return to the gold standard would, but it will achieve the same ultimate goal soon enough, even if the gold standard is never readopted. You see, the dollar, like all paper money, is an old technology, and it no longer brings something technically useful to the table. As money goes through technological change, from coinage to milling to paper money to electronic payment systems, each technological change brings with it efficiencies. And the last big change, electronic payment, has yet to be fully incorporated into our monetary system and our thinking about money. Just as you do not need to have a dollar present to consummate a transaction in dollars, you need not have physical gold present to consummate a transaction in gold. So were we to move to a gold-denominated dollar, this ability to transact electronically would, over time, call into question the usefulness of the dollar as a designated weight of gold, would call into question the usefulness of the dollar as a designated weight of gold. What, after all, is gained by such a designation, as it does nothing to facilitate the transaction? For this reason, with time, state-by-state resumption of gold money will produce the same end result as a return to the gold standard would. Gold itself used as money. Thank you.